32-year-old man with chronic medical issues, certainly potentially a terminally ill medical condition, is gaslit by doctors as he had very low testosterone. This case is absolutely incredible. This man's name is Reuben Samuels. Reuben, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
What I want to do today, guys, is I want to feature this man's case and feature his plight, and I'd like to feature what he's doing in the world for other people that have cystic fibrosis, because he has cystic fibrosis. We're going to talk about that. And not just cystic fibrosis, but as we met each other, we talked about chronic medical issues and just men that have chronic medical issues that have hormonal imbalances, and they are not given the attention that they should. And that's now called gaslighting. Okay. So this is a man who is incredible, man, because you could look at this guy and you look at him and you go, look at this healthy guy. Look at this handsome young guy here. He's got quite a nice body too, because I saw his Instagram, and you know, he's kind of one of us now. He's a big fitness guy, you know, guys. At 32 years old, you were at the end stage, cystic fibrosis. Explain to the group, to the world, what is cystic fibrosis and the medical consequences.
Well, thanks for having me on, Doc. I appreciate it. I've already appreciated the conversation we've had prior to this, and this is just an exciting opportunity to kind of broaden the scope of what we're doing. Cystic fibrosis. I was diagnosed pretty well at birth. It's a genetic condition. It's not something you catch. It's either you have it or you don't. And I have it. My sister passed away from CF the year prior to me. She was born a year before me. And unfortunately, due to complications, she didn't survive. But because of that, they were ready for it. They were looking for it. Back in the 80s, they weren't doing regular testing, genetic testing for it. So they weren't aware when she was born, but they were ready for it with me. CF is pretty well a full systemic condition. All of the underlying issues and all the main symptoms with it all have to do with a genetic issue at a cellular level. And what it creates is a lot of pulmonary issues, so a lot of respiratory lung issues. In my case, I had a significantly severe case of pulmonary issues. It affects the GI, it affects digestion. A lot of CF patients are diabetic or pancreatic insufficient, meaning they have to take enzymes with everything that they eat, anything protein, anything fats, you have to take pancreatic enzymes. So I am not diabetic, but I do have the pancreatic insufficiency. But for me, the main severity was lung function and was the eventual deterioration of my lungs over the course of my life. We deal with a lot of lung infections. Pneumonia shows up periodically. They're called exacerbations, or really, really dangerous lung infections. I figured it out a couple of weeks ago, and I think I've spent a total of a year of my life in hospital, anywhere from 10 to 14 days at a time, 3 to 5 times a year. And so you get used to being around medical staff. A lot of them become your family, your friends. And so that's really kind of led to what was ultimately at around 32, 33 years old. I was really on the tail end of my lung function. I had been in evaluation for a lung transplant for about 6 years. And at that point, it was really sort of an ultimatum point where it was either you move forward with lung transplant or you basically get your affairs in order.
So at that time you were getting, despite that, weren't you training with oxygen? This guy was training with oxygen tanks on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I started really into the fitness world in my 20s. My dad was a phys ed major, psychology major, but played soccer and very fit. He was in the golden age of bodybuilding. I grew up with him bodybuilding, being a gym rat, and I really kind of latched onto that. Not so much in high school, but definitely in college and then into my 20s. And that was actually right after my first major hospitalization. I had 2 types of pneumonia. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and that was sort of my come to Jesus moment. That was where it was really like, you're either going to take your health very seriously or you're dead. And so at that point, I really took a deep dive into the fitness and nutrition world. I had ACE certifications, I had NCSF certifications. I was a personal trainer for a little while on the side of my main job, but a lot of that was just downloading information. I was trying to body hack myself. And this was way before social media. This was way before a lot of those things where we could have these kinds of conversations. And so I was really trying to crack, what could I do through nutrition? What could I do through fitness to live longer? And so I was power training, and at 103 pounds, over the course of about 4 or 5 years, I gained about 20 pounds of muscle, got much fitter, but still reoccurring lung exacerbations, still multiple hospitalizations a year, and that inevitability and that long-term damage after each infection really led to that decline in my lungs. And yeah, the 2 years prior to my lung transplant, I was strapping pony tanks to my back. I would take 2 of these small, we call them pony tanks, these little cylinder tanks. I'd throw one in a backpack, and I actually developed my own oxygen mask, a high flow oxygen mask. And I would go out on the floor and I would power train. A tank would last me about 28 minutes. So at about the 25-minute mark, I had a pulse ox on my finger. I was checking my sats constantly. And so I would, as the tank was dying, I would rush back to the locker room and literally gasping, going, unhooking my tanks, bolting up a new tank, throw it back in the pack, and go out and do another half an hour. The looks that you get in the locker room when you're putting oxygen tanks in.
This is, guys, can you imagine?
Yep.
And, you know, I can only imagine the liability, the gym owner being like, sir, go get out of here.
Yeah, no, I was good friends with the managers, and they all knew my situation. They knew all of my emergency contacts if something did happen.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So listen, so didn't you, and then I know that they said at a certain point, they said, that's it, you need the lung transplant. And you said, hold on, I'm going to go train hard. Now, no steroids. I'm not against men that use steroids, but no steroids. And you said, give me some more time. And you went back to the gym. This guy was training at what, 20% lung function?
16.
16. Wait a minute, guys. This is so crazy. Now, let's fast forward. Before the lung transplant, you ended up doing your research. Your doctors are so amazingly important. This man's had a transplant. Show us the money.
Yeah. You got the
Look at this, guys.
Scar from
this man's
here
had a
all the way.
lung transplant, and it's a modern miracle. He's breathing beautifully. Now, before this, though, he stretched everything out with his training, his exercise, his mentality, his behavior. And then he said, aha, I think I have low testosterone. He went to a doctor. Tell us the story.
Yeah, you mentioned this steroid conversation. Actually, that was actually a part of my conversation way back in my 20s. You know, obviously being a personal trainer, I was around that stuff. I had a lot of access. I trained some athletes that had access to it. And so there was always this question in the back of my mind of, could I do better? Could I gain more mass? Could I gain more muscle to be healthier? And I actually tried to have some conversations with doctors. And of course, I was sort of poo-pooed on about that because, you know, bad, no, don't do that. But in my mind, even I said, but wouldn't the benefits potentially outweigh the risk? Because I was so underweight and it was so hard to gain any kind of weight, even fat is difficult.
This is real cachexia.
Yeah, it's malabsorption because of the pancreatic insufficiency. So the normal enzyme, like your enzymes that your body makes, are about 90% efficient, right? So everything you eat, about 90% gets absorbed. I'm taking an enzyme from a pig, essentially, and it's only about 60% effective. So you imagine I have to eat 30% more calories just to be where you are. And so it's an uphill battle. And obviously the more muscle you gain, the more higher your metabolism. And then it's this constant, it gets harder the harder it gets. And so that was a question, but I shelved it because I said, well, I don't really know the questions to ask. And really looking back now, what I was alluding to by having the steroid conversation was I didn't understand the questions I needed to ask, but the reality was I was experiencing low T potentially even back into my high school years. And so, yeah, as I got closer to transplant, I was on a lot of medications. I was on some experimental medications. These were really lifelines. These were last-ditch efforts. It was like, try this, throw it at the wall, see if it sticks. If it doesn't, you're going to get this transplant. You're going to have to. And one of the drugs that I was on at the time really started to create a mental health situation. And while I was spiraling in depression and this brain fog and all this stuff that this medication was bringing on, I started hunting for answers. And I said, we're going to test everything. And so that's when I really started pushing, like, let's look at my hormones. Let's draw this panel. Let's see what this looks like. Let's, all these things that I'm exhibiting, they can't just be CF. They can't just be chronic illness. Or is the chronic illness creating this environment? I don't know, but let's dig. So I was I checked myself into therapy for the first time. I said, let's draw these labs. I started just exploring whatever. And so these labs come back, and sure enough, it confirms that not just my T was extremely low, but my estrogen was high. My whole panel was just an absolute mess.
And so let's, just in sake of just moving forward with this, because I want people to really focus on this video from beginning to end. And the highlights are this, like, so how low was your number?
Yeah, so my afternoon draw was around 300, 325. I'm sorry, that was my morning. My afternoon draw was a 160.
All right. So yeah. You're a young man, chronic medical illness.
Yeah, this was at 32 years old.
It's a terminal. What's the average age that cystic fibrosis lives to?
Now I believe it's actually like 47. But I've outlived my expectancy, I believe, 5 times. So when I was born, my expectancy was, because of my severity. They said, he'd be lucky to live to 16.
Right.
And then it was 18 and then 20.
So that's why it's not clickbait when I say terminally ill man.
It's not. And there is still technically no cure.
Technically, I know. And when I was in med school and residency, I saw a few guys like you in the ICU.
And on May 26th, at the Upgraded Human Mastermind event, Plano, Texas, I'll be speaking on modern androgen therapy, the history of modern androgens, the spectrum of utility from testosterone all the way through to PEDs, understanding the necessary harm reduction, the androgen markets and future trends, of course, clinical application for both men and women, understanding risks, side effects, and of course, the future of androgens. I've been caring for men on androgens as an internist for over 20 years now. Please buy tickets and come out and see me and all the other great speakers at www.upgradedhumanmastermind.live. Thank you. I'll see you there.
So this man, the doctor, we're not going to go into it. It's bad karma. I'm not going to do it. Shame on that doctor. They don't feel comfortable. They should have referred to another doctor. She said no to the testosterone. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was my first experience. And so I mentor a lot of patients. I work with a lot of patients now, especially both with pre and post lung transplant. But I have thousands of CF patients that I talk to on a regular basis. Yeah. And through our organization and one-on-one, and some are close friends and peers, and others are just saying, listen, what are you doing to stay so healthy? Like, tell me what you're doing. And so through all that kind of anecdotal conversation, I've heard of many women experiencing sexual bias in their healthcare. I had never experienced it firsthand until that time. And I was even sort of thrown off by it. In fact, I went to one of my friends afterwards and I said, is this sexual bias? Did I experience this? And she's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I deal with that all the time. And so I have a lot more empathy for what that's like. But it was It was really frustrating because I had literally the paperwork in front of her saying, all of these labs are wrong. Not just T, but all of them are a mess.
You have cystic fibrosis.
Right. And I said, so what do we do about this? And she says, well, nothing. You have a chronic illness. That's the way it is. I said, what do you mean it's the way it is? I mean, what about injections? What about supplementation? What about all these things? Well, no. There's potential risk if you want to have kids down the road. That can make it more difficult for you and your wife. And I said, well, first of all, I'm trying to live just one more year. Kids aren't exactly on my radar right now. But even if it is, that's a decision for my wife and I to make.
Right.
And there was multiple questions like that I kept on posing these questions and kept on getting this pushback of these preconceived ideas. And I was just really frustrated because I was there for information. I need real science. I'm there for your expertise. And I'm getting bias and I'm getting these preconceived notions of how they think I live. And after a second visit and me saying, really, what are we going to do about testosterone injection? What are we going to do about supplementation? And getting nowhere. In fact, not just nowhere, getting bad information from this person. It's getting incorrect.
It's outright terrible. It's technically medical malpractice, but we're not going to get crazy on that.
No. Yeah, and it's a situation that I'm glad we're bringing light to. I mean, the goal here isn't to be an antagonist. The goal here is to fix it. How do we make this better for other men, not just myself? How do we get this better for other people? So I essentially left my main care team with that specific thing. I'm still seen by them for my respiratory issues and all the other things. And I went outside and I found a wellness clinic here in Kansas City. And I can remember the moment. I'd had to have this conversation multiple times. And if any of the guys have ever been to this point, it's awkward. It's uncomfortable to go in and be like, hey, my manliness is failing me, right? It's there's this stigma behind it, which there really shouldn't be. It's health. This is health, right? And so I went in and I said, in my own exasperation, I was like, here's the situation. I don't know if you can do anything about it, etc. And that was the first time sitting in that clinic office, in that wellness clinic, that the PA looked at me and she said, this isn't in your head. This isn't made up. And we can do something about it and we can do better for you and you'll feel better. And I fell apart. My wife was sitting next to me and I just started crying. It was the first time somebody validated the decades of what I'd been feeling and said, we can do something about it. That was life-changing.
And so fast forward to us. You're on testosterone. How do you feel? How do you, I mean, you look great. I mean,
Shoot, I started it, so, I was at 16% lung function, like we talked about, and that was November of 2018, and my transplant team said, this is it. Like, you are still fit, because I was still in the gym, on oxygen, and they said, you're in this crucial spot of you're healthy enough to get through transplant, but your lungs are failing, And I said, give me a couple of months, because I just found this clinic and they're taking my hormones seriously and I want to see where this goes. And they were like, you have until March. And that was November. They said, you have until March. We're going to see you in March. And if there isn't dramatic change, you have to go for transplant. So January of 19, I started actual testosterone therapy with some other things, vitamin D and getting my overall level. I mean, they were really addressing my whole panel. And within 3 months, so January 1st until the end of March, I gained 9 pounds of muscle. I gained 9 pounds of muscle, not changing anything I was doing as far as training or eating. I gained 9 pounds of muscle. I was experiencing the best sleep I've had in over a decade. My sleep cycles improved. Mental clarity improved. Overall energy improved. Mood improved. I mean, across the spectrum, everything improved except, unfortunately, my lung function because of the amount of scar tissue and damage that I had. So I went back for my final evaluation and they went, what happened? Because my BMI was up. I was looking better. I was healthier overall. But they were like, man, your lungs are still garbage, and so you're in a better place now for a transplant. But it's it's do or die. Literally, it's do or die now. And so we listed. So in March of 19, I listed. 5 weeks later, actually, as of this recording, yesterday was my 4-year anniversary. April 18th, yeah, of my lung transplant. Wild stuff. So yeah, so I ended up still going into the transplant, and even that was a painful situation. Obviously painful, right? Transplant is a deeply traumatic thing. It should not be downplayed. Those that have been through any sort of organ transplant, it's horrific. It's not anything you want to have to experience. It is life-changing. I am so grateful for it and for my donor and for those that say, I'm willing to donate. It literally saves lives. But I still had to go through it. And even there, I wrestled with it. My transplant team basically said, no more injections. And that was a whole other awful experience.
So your 4 years status post lung transplant, you're feeling great, you're working hard. Tell us your message, because the message, guys, we're going to wrap up on this. The message is, I don't want doctors to gaslight anyone. I don't care what it's gaslighting for. If you have low testosterone, even low normal testosterone, you have chronic medical condition, you got to go see a good internist. You can come on the anabolicdocapp.com and I could help you with my medical information. It's always here to stand. But the truth is, you have to be your own advocate. So let's close on this. Tell us, Reuben, you're an amazing person. What are you doing, and how can people contact you, and what should people do from your regard? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm the president. My wife and I are the president and co-founder of Breathe Easy International. It's an organization we started under a different name, Breathe Easy With Us, over a decade ago. And it was initially specifically for CF patients. It was a whole health spectrum hub of information. And since my transplant, we've expanded it to target the top 10 most prevalent chronic respiratory conditions. And so we're really trying to give patients with IPF and COPD and cystic fibrosis, and even COVID-19 is now being included in that spectrum. Long COVID has massive ramifications, respiratory, cardio, neurological issues, and hormonal impact. I mean, it impacts the whole entire body. And so if you're watching this and you've had COVID, take this stuff seriously. This is important to you as well. And so we really broadened that, and we really want the organization, the picture that we're trying to paint is that you've been newly diagnosed, or maybe you were diagnosed many years ago, but you just don't understand everything going on. We want to boil that down into a funnel of really tangible fact, really tangible, actionable things you can do to improve your life even by 1%. And so we hope to do that on a global scale for many patients. And we're actually right now building a brand new website. We hope to launch here in the next couple of months, a new website. And we're hoping the doc is a part of that component as well. And so we're reaching chronically ill, chronic respiratory condition patients. And we really want to give them the head to toe, broad spectrum information for betterment of their life.
Because this is for the whole world, guys, all my brothers all over the world, brothers and sisters, for chronic medical issues. But this is, and you know me, Reuben, it's a brotherhood of men that I saw that were taking androgens or suffering from low androgen status, from medical disease and psychiatric disease. And they didn't only have access, but they were gaslit. And I saw your article in Newsweek. I said, I got to contact the guy. So thank you so much. All right, guys, pay attention to this stuff. Look at this guy's social media. And if anyone you know is suffering with any chronic medical issue, is psychiatric, bring attention to it and really reach out for help. And I just really want to help. If we could, I used to say way back in the day, if I could help one man, that's really truly all I do. And now as a healer, I want to help everyone I can. And that's why I met this other man here, and we're going to work together. So thank you so much, gentlemen. Reuben, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Doc. Appreciate it.